Hello, everybody, and welcome back. Thanks for tuning into another episode here in the series. My name is Dominic. I'm the host of the Android Factory. Just moving along from episode 1 of our series where we're covering the Jetpack Compose Basics Codelab. We now reached the creating columns and rows section, and this is basically the, second step after getting the project up and running to actually being able to build UIs that kind of relate to one another. As we can see here, columns are, vertical, rows are horizontal, and then this box idea are kind of overlaying on top of one another and related to one another as far as the different elements within there. So, you could think of rows and columns as linear layouts. You can think of boxes frame layouts. You could think of all of these as constraint layouts. However you want to imagine it inside of your head, do so it makes sense for you. But let's just think in terms of columns and rows basically for now, to go ahead and modify our UI here. So it says here each child inside of a column will be placed vertically. It tells us to not copy this over, but try changing the greeting so that the column has two text elements like this in the example here. So we can see the default preview, hello, comma, new line, Android. And we see here that it currently looks like this, right? And that is because our greeting composable here is just simply a text inside of a surface here. Now let's see, they want us to keep that same color. So let's just go ahead and cut this out for a second. We're going to go ahead and add in a column here. And our first text is going to say hello, comma, sorry. And then our next text here is just going to say name, right? Yep, something like that. So let's just go ahead and rerun things here. All right, and what do we see? So we do see a vertical stacking here, but we also see that our modifier is kind of messing us up here. So let's just go ahead and remove that really quickly. And once we do, now we don't have any padding whatsoever. So I think what we're going to want to do is retain that padding, but we're going to want to keep it on our column here. So we'll say padding all equals 24.dp. We simply go ahead and rerun things here. And at this point, I'm hopeful, that we do have the UI that we're looking for here, the UI that they've kind of shown. Maybe we'll move that over here so we can see it both. All right, and I did not look ahead, I promise, but this does look pretty close to what we have here. Modifier there, text equals name, really? Yeah, because I interpolated it in there. I guess because we have the exclamation point, but we can remove that and we can just set it there because this is a string value, of course, so we kind of clean things up and we're ready to go. Cool, so now we really get into our first element here of our first demonstration of, this declarative UI and how powerful we can really kind of couple regular code and Compose, in this case Kotlin and Compose, to make UIs come to life here. So they run like any other Kotlin function. This makes building UIs really powerful since you can add statements to influence how the UI will be displayed. For example, you can use a for loop to add elements to the column. We take a look here at this different composable. We have our modifier just for, someone else being able to modify our column. But then we have a names list here with world, comma, compose. And inside of the column, we can iterate over all of the names inside of that list and create a greeting composable with that name. We'll end up with a very interesting, preview here that looks like this. So let's just go ahead and copy this over. All right, so I copied it over, reran it, and nothing changed. And that's because this composable here, the My App composable, doesn't have the corresponding preview one. As you can see here, we have default preview, but if we just go ahead and either create a preview composable for our My App, or inside of here, we can just say My App and rerun things, we should have a little bit different of a preview. Perfect. Now we have both of them available to us. We basically see now the preview of what this composable does, and because we updated it to use our for loop there, we then kind of see how these things will work. And in case it's not already clear, I just went ahead and added another name to this list here, and just want to see how, yep, exactly. So we see how our UI is starting to come together here. We see basically within this one column, we just create n number of greeting composables here, which is that surface with the column and then the two separate layers of text there. So basically we've created columns within columns, right? Because for each column here, we're adding a greeting element, which has a column, and then we have two text attributes in there. So we've put 6 text views basically on the screen here with this little for loop, this little work here, so you can really, hopefully you can start to see the power of basically how amazing Compose can be, especially with, Kotlin and that declarative UI style that we're all learning to love. All right, so it says here we haven't set any dimensions or constraints to our composables yet, so each row takes up the minimum space it can, and the preview does the same thing. So let's go ahead and emulate a small phone of 320 dp, add a width dp parameter to the preview annotation. So that's really nice, that's really helpful. We can just probably change that around to whatever we want as we're developing, right? So let's say, I don't know, let's say 420, sure, why not? We get this to the same size. And yeah, now you can see, what that looks like on a device like that. If we update it to 320, and we see that it gets a little bit smaller there as we would expect. Awesome. So this should make debugging, this should make, development, especially UI development, so much faster. It's really, really interesting stuff. It's so fantastic. So moving on here, it says modifiers are used extensively in Compose. So let's practice with a more advanced exercise. Try replicating the following layout using fill max width and padding modifiers. Okay, so we could see the current UI over here, and we see that we basically want to have these as like two different rectangles, two different cards, stacked on top of one another. So let's see. So we have a fill max width, we have a fill max width modifier that we care for. So let's see, fill max width. What would that do if we add it onto the greeting column? Okay, so that pushes all of these out. And then what did we want? We wanted some padding around the edges. So let's see, how can we get padding around the edges? This is going to be one big column here, right? And we say fill max size. So what if we say padding, let's go with all equals 8.dp. Looks like 8 to me. Let's see. Does that push it away from the edges? Okay, no, that didn't work. Let's see if this modifier here on the greeting column should be the one. Okay, so we have some edges here. Okay, so that makes a lot of sense to me, right? We've told the entire column of this app, which is, basically this entire thing, we want to push it 8 dp in all directions. But the epoxy in me is saying that this is one element, and then this little white can just be declared as like a space, right? I mean, I guess they want us to do it with padding modifiers, but we could put a space in between each little composable there. So let's see, maybe we need to modify our greeting composable there. Or one thing I do understand about composables is that they do matter the order that you paste them in. So the order that you call them in. So maybe the fill max width was overriding the padding that we were interested in. No, because that's the interior one. Maybe we need to have it on our surface here. Let's see. Okay, looks like we got a little something there. So let's see here. Let's see. I think it's a little thick though, right? Because yeah, we're kind of duplicating 8 from time to time. So wait a second. What if we remove this, and that might be good enough? If we just set it on our surface instead, does that push it away and accomplish the same thing? It looks like it does. Okay. Now we have double padding here, right? Which is not necessarily the best, because we have the bottom element here, or sorry, the surface here, the bottom of this has 8 dp, and then the top of this surface has 8 dp, so there's actually 16 dp here, whereas there's only 8 dp here. Alright, so I just reorganized some code here because we were going on to the next line. Set the padding, the horizontal padding to 8 dp. That looks perfect. If we set the vertical one, we get the 16 in there. So I do apologize for bouncing back and forth here, but like I said, I am learning Compose with you guys here. So I don't have all the answers, just trying to think of the best way to do this here. So appreciate the patience. So we'll do start. We could say top also 8 dp, and our end also 8 dp. But I think we forget about the very bottom one, which is unfortunate as well. Yeah, so to me, it seems like we should probably, I don't know, like we could pass in the padding to our greeting composable. All right, let's go back to this, because the problem is, if we want this to be 8, then realistically, we need to have our vertical DP as 4 DP, which is annoying because it's obviously not going to be correct on the top and the bottom. But right, so now this is 8. So I wonder if we can put maybe, okay, I don't know if I like this, but if we say vertical of 4 DP here, that should work, right? That gives us 8 all around. I don't particularly like that, like whatsoever, because we're kind of like blending these two composables as far as like they are related to one another without them realizing it, right? So I don't particularly like that. Yeah, the 4DP. I'd probably rather go with like spacers and stuff like that. But let's go ahead and see what they did because I don't want to spend too much time on this. Oh wow, they actually did that. Okay. I promise I did not look. I am quite surprised that they decided to go this route as well. But maybe this is the way we're supposed to go. I don't know. I don't know. Leave your thoughts down in the comments. How would you have done that? Would you do this 4DP here and then 4DP here and then it understands that 4 plus 4 is 8? Like I don't particularly like that because now the greeting depends on this my app modifier being a certain way, and otherwise it'll look wrong if it's not. So I don't particularly like that, but all right, we're moving on. We're adding a button now. In the next step, you make a clickable element, expands greeting. Oh, so we have to add that button first. The goal is to create the following layout. Button is a composable provided by the Material 3 package. It takes a trailing lambda, and then you can add any content to the button we'd like, for example, text. So don't copy this yet. On click is this. You'll learn about this later. A text show less. To achieve this, you need to learn how to place a composable at the end of the row. There is no align end modifier, so instead you must give some weight to the composable at the start. The weight modifier makes the element fill all available space, making it flexible, effectively pushing away other elements that don't have a weight, which is called inflexible. It also makes the fill max width modifier redundant. Now try adding a button and check out our solution. Oh, no. I didn't actually look. All right, let's figure this out. All right, so inside of our column here, we're going to go ahead and... No, we're not going to add... Okay, so I don't want it to be within the column, that's for sure. I think I want it to be within the row, and the row is going to have a column and then a button. With an on-click of to do, sure, and then this will have a text of what is it supposed to say? Show less, show more, show less, sure, show more. Okay, so we don't want the fill max width. That's what's happening here. So we're gonna want to remove the fill max width there, and then I think what did they say? A weight of we'll say weight 1F, and let's see how that looks if we refresh things here. Okay, we have a button. All right, now we have to align that a little bit better within the row. So I know there is a modifier dot align, and the alignment here would be alignment dot, let's say center vertically, right? That's kind of what we're interested in, I believe. No, what do we have? Okay, we don't want the box scope align, that's for sure. We want the row scope aligned because we're in a row, and let's see if that aligns it. Yep, that's perfect. So that looks good. Now we just don't have the background, right? They wanted to have this. Okay, so maybe instead of a background here, we can just create another surface with that color to, let's say something other than primary. Yeah, so we'll go with background, and let's see what happens there. Oh, okay, that's odd. The button the button looks the way that it should. That makes a lot of sense. We just need to change the color. All right, so let's remove this from the surface because we definitely don't need that. So the background of the button is blue, and I don't necessarily know how to change the background. So looking at all this, not entirely sure. Let's see what they do here. Okay, so you just use an elevated button. Oh, okay, so if we just take elevated button instead, okay, interesting. So that does, I I guess that makes sense. It's okay, cool. Okay, elevated button. I think was it supposed to be all the way on the edge? No, it wasn't. So we can probably put modifier here. Let's say padding, where we say end equals. What does that look like to you? That looks like 24 dp, right? Because it probably is the same of the text. And now that looks like that's coming together there. All right, so cool. Elevated button over button. I guess especially when it's in a surface, that makes a lot of sense, right? Because the surface has this particular color associated with it. So then an elevated button within a surface is probably smart enough to know, okay, I should invert my colors, or I should not be the primary color, because the primary color of our surface is blue. So obviously we want it to look different and stand out. Interesting. All right, I learned something new just now. I'm very happy to do that and kind of discover that with you guys. Smash that like button if you learned something new. Subscribe if you are brand new. And let's continue on here. All right, I think last little bit for this episode, let's cover some state and compose. So far we've created static layouts, but we want to react to users' change to achieve this. And it looks like we are expanding and collapsing this cell, a pretty nice use case, and all that kind of stuff, right? So before we get into how to make a button clickable, how to resize them, you need to store some value somewhere that indicates whether each item is expanded or not, the state of the item. If you followed along from last season, this is really kind of hammering home that concept of a data-driven UI. This is just the first little glimpse of it that we're seeing. So let's see how this unfolds here. So since we have these values in greeting, the logical place for it is in the greeting composable. Take a look at the expanded Boolean and how it's used in the code. Okay, so we're not supposed to do this, but defined as a Boolean, var expanded equals false. And then, okay, it's only used here to just modify the text here. Show less, show more. Note that we also added an on click, where they flip the value of that Boolean every time it's clicked. Makes sense. However, this doesn't work as expected. Setting a different value for the expanded variable won't make Compose detect as a state change, and nothing will happen. So this is the concept of recomposition here, where basically if Compose detects that your composable's content has changed, it will then tell that thing to recompose, to rebuild, and then the UI will get redrawn, and therefore everything will kind of react. It's a very similar concept to like the recycler view implementation, where when it detects changes in certain view holders, only those view holders need to be refreshed, not all of them. So this is definitely the concept of thinking in Compose here, which I've been trying to push you guys for if you've been watching some of the previous seasons. So thank you if you have been. If it's starting to make sense, I'm happy that it's coming together. So let's see, it's not being tracked by Compose. Each time the greeting is called, the variable will be reset to false. Yes, we cannot forget that, again, composables are functions, and functions operate linearly like they do in, just general code, right? So when you declare the expanded Boolean at the very top of this function to be false, nothing ever sets it to true. Yes, this on click will set it back and forth to true, false, but if we were to run this function over and over again, this expanded variable is always false. There's no way for it to start as true, so therefore that will impact this text attribute here to always be saying show more. Not what exactly we want. So instead, we're interested in something with a mutable state of. Now this is a little bit better, but it's not completely there yet. Again, they're telling us not to do this. We can't just assign mutable state of to a variable inside of a composable. As explained before, recomposition can happen anytime and would call that composable again, resetting the state to the mutable state within the value of false. So we're still victim to the same issue, that this is still not complete here. Every time this function runs, we are setting a variable to false, and we don't necessarily want to do that. Instead, we can use this remember block here, and it's telling us here that it's used to guard against recomposition so the state is not reset. So from my understanding, these composable functions can run over and over again, and the variable that's defined here is not affected, and reset basically to whatever we declare it, within this mutable state. You can think of internal state as private variables in a class. The composable function will automatically be subscribed to the state. If the state changes, composables that read these fields will be recomposed to display the updates. I mean, that sounds wonderful, right? That is such an improvement, so much fun, but we do have to know how to use this stuff properly in order to do that. So let's see here. I think that's all that we need here. I think that's kind of the end of this little section. So if we go ahead and copy this into our greeting, we will then, we need to do some imports, of course. Okay, we have our expanded here in our onClick. We will go ahead and say expanded. Yeah, so you do have to reference dot value in order to do so. So we'll say expanded dot value does not equal the expanded dot value. So the dot value is both simultaneously, in this case, setting it and reading that value. So whenever we have something wrapped in the remember block, we need to call dot value to actually access this internal state here. I think the last little bit here was modifying our text. So I'm just going to copy that because I don't feel like typing it out. And we will just put that right here. We could set it equal to our text because we're all good. Let's go ahead and run this inside of an emulator because unfortunately once you start getting into state variables and all that kind of stuff, it is quite difficult and or impossible to get it done inside of the preview. So the preview did a very good job for a lot of the static content and a little bit of dynamic content, right, as far as like names being passed in, but it doesn't cover everything, especially user interactions like this onClick. So here we are up and running. We do see exactly, well, pretty similar to what we would expect. I guess we have this purple view here. And let's see what's going on here. That's not working properly. Sorry, this is not working at the moment because I said not equals to. Really, we want to set it equal to the opposite value. I apologize. That's a very silly mistake there. But at this point, yeah, there we go. Now we see that this is updating. And we see that the state is, retained in the correct composable here, right? So these are both greeting composables, but we can basically modify them independently because they kind of have their own, remember variable. They have their own state internally to the composable that is not affected by, the other ones, even though they are the same composable reused here. So pretty interesting stuff. I'm happy that we got to, run it inside of an emulator. Then it looks like here we've defined an interesting way to basically make it a little bit taller, a little bit larger. So let's see here. All right, so let's just go ahead and copy that. We'll put that in here. And then it said inside of our column, we did padding where the bottom equals our extra padding. And if we just go ahead and rerun this now, we should see things kind of, yeah, look at that. That moves completely. Now, interesting. I think it's because we have this vertical alignment here to be centered that the button is actually moving, which is probably suboptimal. So let's go ahead and just very quickly remove that. And rerunning things here, we see that now that button stays in the same spot, but we we do have that expanding and collapsing working as we would expect. All right, cool. Thank you for following along. If you made it this far, please smash that like button. Subscribe if you are brand new. Comment down below, real fan, to let me know. Let me know your thoughts here. I know it's a little, haphazard and a little all over the place because I'm learning Compose with you guys here. But hopefully that's kind of appreciated a little bit and you can kind of see the thought process and how everything comes together. But in the next episode, we're just going to continue on here. We're going to talk about state hoisting here, and we'll just keep building this app out. So I'm excited to bring more content. I'll catch you guys in the next one.